So today we're going to talk about both cellular respiration and photosynthesis. And both of these processes are all about energy flow. So we're going to start for just talking about that. So everything that happens on the planet that has to do with living organisms is going to require energy. Okay, and the ultimate source of energy for most ecosystems is going to be the sun. Okay, so the sun is going to have its own type of energy, which we're going to call electromagnetic radiation. We're going to go more into the sun part of this when we talk about photosynthesis, but the sun is going to provide that solar energy that will then be converted into chemical energy in plants. Okay, and so it originates from the sun, and then we have this process called photosynthesis that takes place. And during photosynthesis, what's happening is that plants are taking in solar energy. They're going to convert that. So convert solar energy into chemical energy. And that chemical energy is going to be in the form of glucose. Okay, so we've talked about glucose. Glucose is going to be this molecule that we see a lot. It's very important. So it's C6H12O6. And so what's going to happen is we're going to take sunlight energy and convert it into actual glucose. And so glucose is a chemical, and so it's now going to be in a chemical form. Okay, animals and plants themselves are going to depend on glucose for energy storage. Okay, so all animals will depend on this conversion. So without photosynthesis, basically life would not take place. Okay, and so I want to show you this image. What we're going to see over and over again in this part is that photosynthesis and what we're going to talk about first is going to be cellular respiration. These are intertwined, okay? So photosynthesis is going to be this process where sunlight energy comes in. It's going to take place in the chloroplast. We're going to do this process of photosynthesis. In that process, you make this molecule called glucose. You also are going to produce something called, oxygen, O2. These two molecules then will go into cellular respiration. And so animals will do cellular respiration. Plants also do cellular respiration. Basically, every organism is going to use some part of this process of cellular respiration, which then produces ATP. ATP is the only usable form. So we eat molecules like starch, we break it down into glucose. Glucose then has to be converted into ATP for us to actually use it. We do not use glucose directly. During the process of cellular respiration, glucose will be broken down, O2 is going to be created, and are used. We're going to use this to actually break down glucose. And then we will kind of have a byproduct of water and carbon dioxide. These are going to be the starting products of photosynthesis. Okay, so carbon dioxide, the carbons, oxygens, the hydrogens and oxygens from water, these are what's going to then make glucose. Okay, so you're going to see there's carbons, hydrogens, oxygens. These are going to be arranged differently in order to produce glucose. So this is the process we're mainly talking about today. Now, we can separate different organisms into different groups based on kind of what they're able to do. Can they do photosynthesis and cellular respiration, or can they only do cellular respiration? And so I'm going to give you a category of these. And so the first group are going to be called the producers. Okay, another name for them is going to be that these are going to be called autotrophs. So autotrophs are going to be organisms that can create their own organic molecules from inorganic molecules. So I'll write that down here. So there are organisms that make all their own organic molecules from nutrients that are entirely inorganic. Okay, so when we're talking about this, we're talking about like they're taking CO2, they're taking H2O. So these are inorganic. They are not living things. They're also going to take nutrients and minerals. They can then combine those to make organic molecules. So like cellulose, starch, glucose, those types of things. That is what an autotroph is. When you think of autotroph, think this is basically kind of self, like you're doing it yourself, self, and the word troph means feeder. So self-feeders. So we can put that right here. So self-feeders. Okay, these are producers. So they're kind of producing the food. Plants are going to be the group that we talk about the most that are in this group. So plants are going to be our producers. Now, a second group are going to rely on the producers for everything, okay? And this is going to be the group that we're found in. We are going to be considered consumers. Okay, so we consume materials. The other term for this is going to be heterotrophs. So the word hetero means different, troph means feed, so there are, you could say maybe hetero means other, and so it's like other feeders, different feeders, so they're not feeding themselves basically. So heterotrophs cannot make organic molecules from inorganic ones. Okay, so cannot make organic molecules from inorganic ones. Okay, so they must consume or eat, aka eat, either plants directly, so you can eat plants directly, okay, or they can eat animals that eat plants. Okay, so if you're a vegetarian, purely vegetarian, or let's say if you're like a vegan, you are only eating plant products, okay? So those would be, you're eating all producers. If you are an omnivore or something that eats other animals, that is going to be a consumer as well, but what they're doing is they're consuming animals that have already eaten plants. So plants are kind of like the bottom of this, you know, if we're gonna look at it, the plants are down here. They are going to be the major source of food. And then on top of that, we can have these other groups where we eventually will name these, but they're going to be like herbivores, and then we can have carnivores up here on top. Okay, but the plants are gonna support all of the consumers.